in?
Oh, I got into architecture because um, I wanted to be in the arts, but it sort of wasn't big enough for me to do a picture in a frame. And I was much happier thinking about something getting built. And I like the complexity of architecture, that you have to do technical and artistic things together. And it's historical, and it goes back centuries. You have to build on it. There's a societal relationship, community relationship, cultural relationship, and it's artistic. And I was really good at it. I'm very visionary, so when you're good at something, you know it right away. Like I knew I was an athlete because I didn't have to be told. And I knew I was really good at architecture. And there just was no doubt from day one that I was going to go right through and do some nice things. So, yeah, and of course I loved every minute of it.
What have been the most rewarding parts of architecture or projects or?
Well, I do love the vision, creating the vision with the client. I think that's my favorite part. Have a client that doesn't have that vision and to bring vision to the table and be able to draw. And of course, I love drawing right in front of them. They sort of get, whoa. And with that, you can easily, they get it. They understand what you're talking about. Just words isn't enough. It's really drawing.
And any projects stand out over your career that?
Well, I was just thinking, most of the projects I've done have been, massive rehabs, gut rehab, and so then it ends up being a lot of interior architecture, and I like that. That's been terrific. I'm very good with colors and materials and circulation, organization. So that's been fine, and that's, you have to be able to do that in a city like Boston, which is all mostly renovation. It's hardly any new construction, so that's been good. And I liked running an office, and I founded the company, and I liked having people work for me, and then Paul, the company, and we had a lot of fun working together. The hours are huge that you have to work in architecture, sort of around the clock. It's not a good fit with a family, but it was well worth it. I met a guy at MIT who was 7 years younger than me, but we were drawn to each other because the way we thought about architecture, and sort of an opposite of Ronnie, and very cerebral and quiet and shy. And it was actually one of our professors who said to me, you should meet this young man who has blonde hair and a beard, and he's down in Jack Meyer's studio, because even though the way you approach a problem is entirely different, you often come up with the same solutions. So I went down and saw him, and I'm looking at one of his, his drawings. First of all, he can draw much better than I can, and but the solutions were very the same. Like I think it was a project was a church and a steeple and community, building a community, and I was blown away how beautiful his drawings were and his models. But anyway, we started to just be part of the same group that would hang out together. Yeah, I'll tell you about my family. Well, I just grew up in a very loving family, where my father's side of the family, being Italian, was very emotive and noisy and fun. And my mother's side, like with Aunt Dot and her mother, they were very, they had a lot of achievements and were more reserved than the Italians. But the combination was just wonderful, and I'm sure when my parents got married, neither family was happy. I mean, my mother is like as waspy as they come, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and I'm sure her family was probably not happy that she was marrying an Italian boy, and the Italians probably were not happy that Jerry was marrying a Protestant girl. But it turned out to be just a really wonderful combination, and I was the oldest, and we built the house out in Weston, and I got to be part of that because I was like 6 and 7, and why they built this beautiful house. And I had all the advantages of growing up in a beautiful community, and I rode horses and built forts out in the woods and had a lot of friends, and I always had tons of friends. I was very popular, whatever that means.
So what about your Gerard DeNapoli,
My father, Gerard,
right? What about his family?
oh, they're wonderful.
Yeah, but tell me about
Nani,
the names of his parents and where they were from. And
yeah, Rose Tintindo was my Nani, and her husband, my grandfather, was Angelo, and he was a tailor.
but what were their last names?
DeNapoli.
Okay.
And I was Darleen Ruth DeNapoli. And, they lived in Newton. And when I first was born, I was born down in Washington, D.C. during the war. But then we came up and my grandparents, my father's parents had the big house, grapevines, and then they had the duplex. And the idea was that the kids could live in the duplex with their children. So we lived there for a while, and then we built
Where
the
was
house
this?
in Newton, Chestnut Hill. And it's right in front of Montalvernia Academy, which is a Catholic school. And we know that the nuns thought that they would inherit the land and the house and stuff, but no, it got sold. And but I went for just my kindergarten at the Catholic school, and portion of the first grade. And I can remember I was coloring, and I was coloring outside the lines, and the nun came by and whacked me with a ruler and said, "Color inside the lines." And I said, "I don't like to color inside the lines. I like to color outside the lines," which I've been doing my whole life. Now I get paid a lot of money for it.
So what was the name and the profession of your grandfather? Name and profession of your grandfather.
Angelo, I said, Angelo DeNapoli, tailor, and Rose, who was my nanny, she would stay at home. They came over, on a boat to Ellis Island, and actually, part of their family went to Argentina, and part of them came here to Boston. So there was a big exodus from Italy at some points to go to Americas. That's when they came. I think my grandmother was about 11, and my grandfather was about 16. So, and then my father was, they came from families of 9 or 10, and my father was the firstborn grandchild out of that whole group. So Jerry was special. Everybody loved Jerry.
So your father's full name was what?
Gerard Ralph DeNapoli.
My father's full name was?
My father's full name was Gerard Ralph DeNapoli, and my brother is a junior, so he's Gerard Ralph DeNapoli Jr. he's 2 years younger than me, and my sister is 5 years younger than him, so she's 7 years younger than me, Lenore.
And what was, talk a little bit about your father, his career and.
Oh, my father, he's wonderful. He was just fantastic, very handsome, soft-spoken, smart. He went to Northeastern University he was a chemical engineer, and then the Navy sent him to MIT as a meteorologist during the war. And you know, I grew up with him running everything, and he was like the head of the Boy Scout Council. He was head of this, he was head of that. And so my mom used to get upset with him because he was always going out at night to these various functions. But he was a wonderful guy, just very smart, very kind. He never struck me once. My mother, on the other hand, used to chase me around with a hairbrush. And the only time I really saw him get mad is when I told my mother to shut up. And he was furious. I ended up in my bedroom. But he was had a calming influence on the whole house. You know, we had a wonderful family.
And so what did your father do after he got out of the war? My father
worked at Major Young in Charlestown, and you know, it takes about 15 minutes to get from Weston to Charlestown now, and it used to take 2 hours. And he became vice president there, and then he moved on to Alberta Culver, you know, VO5 here in Chicago, and he was the president of Culver Chemical, the chemical company of Alberta Culver. So he did extremely well, and we just stayed in Weston. You know, he just did his thing, and we were in Weston. My mom was, you know, in the garden club and played a lot of golf, and it's a pretty nice life for her.
And then when did your father, how old was your father when he had a heart, talk about when he had a heart attack. My father was? My
father was 52 when he had a heart attack, and he died right away. You know, he's what we used to call a type A personality, where, you know, he was very energetic and, you know, out there, and he was only 52. He was way too young to die. But I remember that night so well. Gary and I went down to, they were living, my mother and father were living in Rhode Island because he owned a company down there. And so we went down to the apartment where they lived. It was just awful. We couldn't believe it, you know. Big loss.